Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. My name is Dion Lafocade. I am the Technical Director of the Trinidad Tobago Football Association, and I would like to welcome you here today on this rainy Saturday in Trinidad Tobago. Right, but I consider it showers of blessing, right? And we're going to be really, really blessed today with our presenters and the folks we have on. All right, I want to take this time now to pass over to Mrs. Annette Knott, who is going to open us in prayer. Mrs. Annette Knott, please.
Thank you, Dion. And this responsibility that I now have each Saturday, I really have to take it on with a serious role. So today we pray as people of faith. We ask in this group of multi-faith coaches and administrators, whoever our master is, for strength in these unprecedented times. We pray for your love and compassion to abound as we walk through this session. We ask for wisdom for those who bear the load of making decisions with widespread consequences, our Prime Minister, our government. We pray for those who are suffering with sickness and all those who are caring for them, and for those who have died from this COVID pandemic. We ask for protection for the elderly and vulnerable, not to succumb to the risk of the virus. We pray for the misinformation to be curbed, that fear may not take hold in our hearts and our minds. And as we exercise the good sense that you, in your mercy, provide, Master, may we also approach each day in faith and hope, trusting in your goodness towards us as a country. And we ask you, Lord, a special prayer for our team this evening. We know that they are good chances, but we still say and pray for the right result for Trinidad and Tobago. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Knott. And I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Nicholas Gomez, the FIFA TTFA member of the Normalization Committee. Mr. Gomez, welcome.
Thank you, Dion, and thank you, Annette, for that most beautiful prayer. Really touching. Welcome all coaches. Welcome us all on this wonderful Saturday that Dion has so gratefully and graciously arranged for us. Another in the great series of, everybody in. And special welcome to Nadine and Jelani, who are going to walk us through a most important topic of communication. How do we communicate with one another? And I have to say, I look forward as part of the Normalization Committee and taking some tips, because we ourselves need to improve in this area. So we look forward with excitement on what will be shared with us today. And I ask you all to, warmly participate and contribute, and have a great session, everyone. So welcome again, and great for you all to be here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gomez. Thank you very much. We're very glad to have you. And I'm also going to ask Mr. Tobias Otley, who is the head of the Sports Science Unit for the Trinidad Tobago Sports. Mr. Tobias, can you please also, after your speech, can you also introduce the two speakers, and then they will take over from there. Thank you.
Yeah, afternoon, everyone. Afternoon. Thank you, Dion.
Good afternoon, Tobias.
It's a pleasure on behalf of Sport Company and the League Development and Performance Unit to facilitate this session today. For those of you that have been on regularly and this is not your first time, the quality has been very good across each of these workshops, and we aim to continue that. It's our pleasure to also open the eyes to everyone that sports psychology is actually a broad-ranging topic. It's a tool. I think anybody who's heard me speak before would say it's all about putting tools in the coaching toolkit. It's not a plaster to put over a sore. It's not, I have a problematic player, I'm going to send them a sports psychologist, but it's so much more and so different. So the real superstars of today, Dr. Nadine Sammy. So she's not just Nadine, she's Dr. Nadine Sammy and Mr. Jelani Robertson. Both of them are sports psychology officers within the department. Very well practiced individuals. And I hope that you all enjoy this session that they've been looking forward to presenting to you all today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So Nadine, Dr. Sammy and Jelani, it's over to you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And hello and welcome to everybody. We really appreciate you coming out today. I'm Nadine and I will be kicking things off. So I'm just gonna share my screen. Bear with me 1 second. There we go. Okay. So I am really, really happy to be presenting with Jelani Robertson today. He is, we're just 2 or 3 people on the sports psychology team. Our lead, Amanda Johnson, is here with us today as well. So we're really happy that, that she's able to participate. So Jelani and I are going to be presenting on communication makes it happen. That's right. Now, I asked Jelani to help me come up with a name because he's very good at coming up with catchy titles. Jelani, you want to jump in and tell me why it wasn't cooperation and it's communication?
First of all, good afternoon, everyone. And I am ashamed that this is my first contribution, but actually, when we were trying to come up with the name, the song Cooperation makes it jumped into my head. Not that I've watched Sesame Street in a few years. And I suggested, why not communication makes it happen? And for better or worse, Dr. Sammy has enabled me and made it happen.
Well, no, I think thanks, Jelani. I think the kicker was when we started to develop a lot of the content, what we found is that communication is really a core skill. It's the root of so many other things in sports psychology and in coaching. So it actually fit really well. And it gives you a little bit of insight into our humor. Hopefully you appreciate. Okay, so what we're gonna do today, we have a little outline, right? We're gonna start with a little bit on our unit. So as Toby said, we are from the Elite Development and Performance Unit. Many of you, I'm sure, will be familiar, but for those who aren't, short introduction. We'll start off with a little bit about us. We'll go into that, and then we will go into an overview of communication. Now, we're not going to get too in-depth into it, just a little overview, and then we go into the links between coaches and communication. What is, why is it important to coaches? Why bother to come here today and speak on it and to discuss? So we'll discuss that. Jelani will take us into some base considerations for communication. And then we go into something which I term communication and role ambiguity. If it sounds ambiguous, don't worry, all will be revealed in time. And then we will end with effective communication. And we've chosen to do this from the perspective of a study that was done in 2006, where the authors pulled from their own work and from lots of different research. Now, what you'll find today is that we have gone into the literature. We've gone and looked at studies. We've looked at research from decades to compile what we have here. But we've also used what we know from sports psychology textbooks, from our own work, from school, things that we would have discussed with Amanda, with coaches, from our own experience, Jelani coaches. So a lot of that has come together to lead to the content today. So I hope that you will enjoy it, that you will learn something, that you'll be reminded of things, that you'll be stimulated by some of it, and that it will foster growth as well. We would like to ask that you hold questions until the end. We will have a question and answer period. In the meantime, make a note of them if you think you might forget, and we will have 2 breakout rooms as well, where we'll have a chance to get to know each other a little bit more and discuss some of the content. Okay, so really quickly about me. So a sport performance and psychology officer at EDPU. And you'll hear a bit more about that as we go forward. So my undergrad degree is in straight psychology, but I have always loved sport and always wanted to specialize. So I went on to do my master's and PhD in sports and health sciences with a sports psych focus. So a lot of research on sports psychology specifically, social support, stress, coping, attention. It was very intense, but very fulfilling. In terms of football specifically, I've not coached football myself, but I was co-lead of the sports psychology program at Exeter City Football Academy for 2 years. So we worked with footballers from under 9 straight up to 18. And it was a very eye-opening experience for me as a sports psych practitioner within those 2 years. And I have learned a lot, and I really love working with coaches. So there's some football background there apart from being a fan of the sport. So that's a little bit about me. I'm going to hand over to Jelani now. Jelani, what I'll do is I'll stop sharing my screen so you can take over, and he will take you through the next few slides.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sammy. And again, good afternoon to one and all. Thank you so much for joining us today. As Nadine said, hopefully everyone can take something away from this and definitely go towards growth and communicating. If that 1% better, then we'll take that. So as for me, just like Dr. Sammy, I am a sport performance and psychology officer attached to the Elite Development and Performance Unit. I graduated from University of the West Indies with a general bachelor's in psychology before specializing in sport and exercise psychology at esteemed Brunel University in London. Absolutely love that experience. And that experience also led me to great experience as a trainee sports psychologist at Queen's Park Rangers Football Academy, where my supervisor was and still is the head of the academy psychology program, and also very fortunately at Sutton High Performance Tennis Academy. Unfortunately, because tennis is my main sport, and it has been my main sport for the past 16 years. I'm not going to give any more numbers than that. If I look young, I'm just going to take that. I'm also a retired dragon boat racer, and I love to dabble in Olympic weightlifting, although I do not think it shares the love I have for it for me, but I digress. In terms of the EDPU, and I just give a little quick overview and some insight into who we are and what we do. So we support, and we are charged with supporting our elite athletes, so that's junior and senior, developing elites in the junior field and international podium reachers, potential, and the like. We have a nice system to register athletes. So if you follow me with this lovely snaking diagram I've created here, so the NGB, or the governing body, would request support from our unit for a specific team or athlete. And then our executive assistant, the lovely Miss Kathleen Castillo, will distribute a registration package. The registration package contents could be seen below. And then this package is returned to us, following which our team lead or unit lead, Mr. Otley, contacts the athlete to arrange an initial intake meeting where we get to know the athlete and the coach, or parent, and they get to meet us, the sports science professionals. Following this, the sports psychology team, because this one is sports psychology focused, the sports psychology lead, Ms. Amanda Johnson, meets with the relevant sports psychology consultants to discuss the incoming athlete, and then in that discussion we decide where the athlete, or to whom the athlete is assigned. They then assign SPC, contacts the team or manager, or the athlete or parent if under 18, to arrange that initial intake between the athlete and sports psychologist. Consent is obtained, needs analysis conducted, and sports psychology consultations then begin. So that just gives you a little overview into the process. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight into what we do and how we do it at the unit. Seeing as we're on the topic of sports psychology, I'll just give a brief introduction about the field itself and try to do it justice, because it's quite a bit. So according to the British Psychological Society, sports psychology as a profession aims to help athletes prepare psychologically for the demands of competition and training. So it also is a massive part of it is also about optimizing athlete well-being. So we're not only and I'm not only talking about myself here, but the whole team at the unit, we're not only concerned about great performance, I mean, the consistent performance, but we're seriously concerned about athlete well-being, probably first and foremost, because before they are an athlete, you're a person, right? So examples of the scope of work for sports psychologists. But this part could go on for ages, but I'll just try to keep it to 3. So we help athletes overcome, for instance, the psychological challenges of an injury. We also try to help equip officials with tools necessary to manage the stressful and demanding aspects of being officials in these highly pressurized environments. And finally, we also work with coaches on building team cohesion within their squad, amongst many other things, right? But as I said, we could go on and on here, but we're really here today to work with the coaches about communication. And so now I have the pleasure of passing it all back to Dr. Sammy.
Very much. I think you did a great job you didn't have a lot of time there, and I feel like it was represented quite well, so thank you. All right, so let's, now that we have some background, let's kick off communication. So communication is one of those things that I think everybody does. We all communicate. We have since we were babies. Think about, how does a baby communicate that it is hungry, for example, or uncomfortable, or wants attention? Is that verbal or non-verbal? Do they have the language skills? How do we develop language skills? So you're already starting to see that communication starts from very, very young. It doesn't necessarily have to be verbal. It encompasses a lot of different elements. So John Fiske said, way decades ago, communication is one of those human activities that everyone recognizes, but few can define satisfactorily. Now, we are still going to try to have a workable definition here for the sake of being able to discuss it. So according to Pearson and Nelson, communication is defined as the process of understanding and sharing meaning. So we'll go with that for now, but is it more than that? Is communication more than understanding and sharing meaning? So what we would do now is we look to some of the key elements of communication. So communication is a core skill. It can be taught and learned. So I really want everyone here to try and keep an open mind today as we go through it, as we go through this session. Now, you may be aware of many of the things that we're going to talk about, but hopefully you may think of something in a different way, or we may spark some kind of connection that maybe you haven't made before. So taught and learned communication, that's a key factor or a key element of communication. The next thing is that many researchers, many sports psychologists, many academics have really thought about communication in a scientific way. As such, many different models of communication have sprung up. I've put a few examples on there. We are not necessarily, in fact, we're not at all going to delve into what these models are. We didn't necessarily think that you would need to know the ins and outs of all of these. We don't know all the ins and outs of all of these offhand anyway, because there are so many. However, we don't think it's necessary to understand all the little scientific ins and outs in order to effectively communicate or improve your communication. That is something we could chat about another time if you are interested. But it is very important to acknowledge that a lot of research has been done and that these exist, and as we try to break down communication. So as I mentioned before, there are different types of communication, for example, verbal and non-verbal. So I used the example of the baby earlier. That would be non-verbal communication. So, okay, so we go back to our original definition. Communication is the process of understanding and sharing meaning. Now, I like that. I think it's very workable. But if we had to consider some of these elements, maybe we can expand that definition. So communication, another one to consider, is therefore the exchange and flow of information from one person to another or many others. It involves a sender transmitting information, whether verbal or non-verbal, to a receiver or many receivers. So you're starting to see, hopefully, that this incorporates a lot more or a few more elements of the communicative process. But we could be here all day if we tried to get it perfect. So I think that we can try and use that going forward, but it's something we can discuss in our breakout rooms if we feel that fully encapsulates what communication is. Now, more than what is communication, we want to know about successful communication or effective communication in sport and today in coaching. So some authors have purported that successful communication is achieved when there is concordance or agreement between the intended message being sent by a sender and its perception by the receiver. So basically, let me ask you a question. Have you ever had a time where, and you don't even have to think of a coaching scenario. At any point in your life, have you ever had a misunderstanding with somebody? And has that been because there's been miscommunication? So it certainly happened to me. I am sure it will happen to me again in future. And this is dependent on a number of variables, which Jelani has actually done a really great job of bringing some of those points together as to the why that might happen. But successful communication, so that's what we're thinking about now. You give somebody a message. Say you text somebody, love our phone. I love my phone, not gonna lie. You text somebody, you're in a hurry, right? Send a little message, you don't reread send. So I have sent this message. I intend it in a certain way. I want to get information across, or maybe share information, convey meaning. And that person receives it. Has that person received it in the way in which I was intending? That's really what it is. It's a lot of words, but I think you can hopefully understand that basic concept. Communication is unsuccessful if I send something to you and you really don't get where I'm coming from. And it happens all the time. So one of the things we're going to talk about, some of the, on the next slide, in fact, I'm going to introduce some of the barriers to communication. But Jelani is going to talk in more detail about what are the things we have to consider when we're communicating that can lead to that ineffective communication or unsuccessful communication, if we had to use the term on this slide. Okay, so what are some of the barriers? Now, we're not going to get too deep into it, but I want you to have a look at this table. Now, there are several different barriers to communication. Today in Trinidad, I know we have Annette and others in Tobago. We have people from all across the world today. So I'm in Northwest Trinidad right now. It has been raining like crazy. And when I was setting up, one of the things I was concerned about was the background noise of the rain, because it was so heavy at one point. I thought, oh my gosh, are people going to be able to hear me? What is my backup plan? Okay, I have my little earphones with a mic. But it's a real concern is something like physical or environmental barriers, things like noise. So you can see that as you go down the table. Something else might be the wrong choice of medium. For example, if I need to get a message to somebody quickly, what is the best way to do that? Would I text them or would I write them a letter? So these are things you have to start becoming aware of. That said, I got a package from TT Post recently, on time, great service. Next thing, semantic barriers. Semantic means meaning, right? So this could be caused by, so remember, we're thinking miscommunication, unsuccessful communication. This can be caused by what they call varied connotative meanings or abstract meanings. We move on to cultural barriers. Even within Trinidad and Tobago, we are a shared culture of Trinbagonian, but there are many subcultures within that. So even between, you know, two Trinis, two people from Tobago, there can be miscommunication there because of some small cultural difference. Psychological and attitudinal barriers are a big one. If you go down to the caused by, you will see that moods, attitudes, and relationships can influence how communication is sent and interpreted, so received. That certainly happened. Again, I'm sharing here. Earlier this week, I felt very stressed, and I think I probably came across as short to some people. Now, it wasn't my intention to be short with them, but that me feeling stressed changed the words I would use to communicate, changed the frequency in which I communicated with others. And the last one, barriers caused by varying perceptions of reality. Sounds like Twilight Zone. It's not. This is basically different levels of understanding and comprehension between people. So if you had to give somebody a piece of information and they were an adult like you would use a certain set of words, language, context, but is that the same message, the exact same message, and in the exact same way that you would talk to a 5-year-old child? Because their level of understanding and comprehension might be different. And Jelani has got some slides on this, so I'm not going to expand too much because I don't want to give away what is to come. Okay, so we're going to have breakout rooms for now, right? We kind of have an idea of what communication is, some of the key elements of communication. We have a workable definition. So I'm going to put everybody into breakout rooms now. We're going to go for 5 minutes. It's going to be 4 participants per group. I would like to encourage everyone just to try to be open-minded, to share with each other, to explore ideas when you are in this breakout room. So what's the question? There's 2 questions. First one, is communication important in coaching? Because I've discussed communication so far, but I haven't really linked it too much to coaching. So is it important? No, maybe, maybe not, to different degrees. I don't know. Discuss with each other and then discuss why you think yes or no or maybe or to some extent. So that's what we're going to do. It's pretty simple. Let's get to know each other. Let's get cracking on the topic. Okay, so breakout rooms. Now we have, you all help me do some quick maths. That's from a great song. I don't know if you know it. We have 83 participants. I'm pulling out my calculator. So we have, oh no, I lie, 85 participants divided by 4, 21.25 rooms. We'll go 21 rooms. We're gonna assign automatically and remind of the question, is communication important in coaching? And if so, why? You could discuss how you know, go if you run out of time, come back, share with the group. Okay, so we're gonna go for 5 minutes. Now I have to click on options. My goodness. Y'all, I'm so sorry. All right, 5 minutes. We're gonna have a countdown. Come on. When there's 10 seconds left, so you'll know, maybe let's go with 15 seconds left, so you can just wrap up your final point. And here we go. So you'll be invited to join rooms. Okay, I think we are back. Yes, we are. Welcome back, everyone. Hopefully, in fact, can I get some feedback? Do you think that was enough time to discuss, or did you want a little more time? And you can pop it in the chat or unmute and let me know.
I think that's, well, for me, I think that's enough.
The time wasn't enough for our group. We 2 people just spoke, and that was it.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, time was very short.
Okay, a little more time. Some people are saying plenty time. Some people are saying a little more time.
Well, my group just had two people, so.
Okay, all right, gotcha. Okay, yeah, I was just collecting information because we have We have another breakout coming up soon. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for engaging with your group. What I want to do now is just get a little bit of feedback from you. So we had what, 21 groups. It's a lot of participants, which I'm very happy for. So I guess anybody from groups 1 to 10, do you want to share with us just a little overview of what you thought or what the consensus in your group was? And I encourage you to please, unmute and share with us, or you could write in the chat.
Yeah, I'll speak. I think I've from group 12. I think that's what I see, myself and Aaron. Well, we were basically discussing how important it is as coaches. Communication is very important because we want our messages to be clear to the players. So we ask the players to do things for us as coaches. So if the communication is not clear, we won't get the optimum results from the players. And we also discuss an important aspect also of coaching is listening. Listening, because as coaches, we expect the players to listen to us, but we also need to listen to the players. So these are some of the basics that we were discussing, Aaron and myself.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Those are two excellent points. Clarity of messages, but also that communication is not just about delivering or sending messages, but receiving them as well. That's great. Anybody from group? So you were from group 12. So let's open it up.
I'm from group. I was in group 3, I believe.
Yeah, sure. Share with us, Colin.
Just to make it quick, I agree. We were in agreement with the last speaker in what he said. Communication has to be a two-way street in life, because when you talk football or sport is life. Sport is part of life. So what we also said, as he said, it mustn't be only a one-way street. The players you must also listen to your players and hear what they have to say. It was also said that the method of how you have to communicate may have to change according to who is supposed to receive this communication. So your style may have to be slightly different according to what group you're speaking to. All right. So in other words, so maybe if some people you can speak, and for an example, not to go on too long here, for another group you may have it to be a bit more visual. So you may have to show exactly what you want.
Colin, I'm gonna pause here because you're doing Jelani part for him there,
What's that?
I say your answer, Jelani going to be discussing these things coming up soon.
If Colin wants to take my role, that's fine,
No, Jelani, it's just that I have been in the coaching business and in the life business a long time, and I was also in a group with Mr. Mareri Gonzalez and another coach Denise, we have been in this business a long time, so we have picked up along the way.
I can definitely tell.
That's great. Thank you so much, Colin.
I stopped there. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Okay, so we have 2 more hands, so we'll just take short contributions from Lyndon and Yannick. We'll start with Lyndon, since I see your hand up.
Yeah, what we were saying is that effective communication to take place is a transfer knowledge, and therefore, depending on the age group, you want to be in tune with the language of that age group. So that if, let's say, they're 5-year-olds and you have to do, you get involved with Peppa Pig and that kind of stuff. Now you're able to make quick connections and they tend to trust you a little bit more,
Yes, I like that. I like the idea.
A little bit faster. So in my case, that is some of the methodology that I use. And then similarly, depending on the level of the kids. So if you're coaching grassroots, then you're more generalized. As the coach just mentioned, you might have to be more visual or whatever, depending on. And then if you have kids that are more advanced, like an elite group or a national team pool or group, then you may be even able to speak in a different language or use different jargon. So just the different group.
That's a very meaningful contribution, and it reflects some of what was said before. So that's great. And then we have one more hand. I think it was Yannick. I can't see anymore.
Hi, Yannick Quintal. I was in a group with Ryan and Pius, and it's technically we piggybacking off of what everybody else was saying, and that effective communication calls from the coach. It's important for coaches to be effective communicators, because especially when you're teaching and coaching kids and going up into the different ranks, you have to be able to look at different forms of communication. So some people or some children might be good at auditory communication, so like they can listen to instruction and they'll be able to carry it out easily. Some people may be better like theoretical ones, so you could tell them what is and they'll tell them what the skill is and you have an idea of how to do it. And then some are visual learners and they learn by doing. So you could show them a skill and they can pull it off the bat, or once they practice the skill, the better they practice the skill, the better they'll be able to carry it out and whatnot. So you have to be able to know your personnel, know your people, in order to be able to figure out what are the best ways of communicating like different instructions, tactics and stuff like that. And Pius was getting to a point where the different ways of communicating. So is there a way to communicate aggressive? Do you have to communicate aggressively to get a point across? The tone, I guess he was getting to the tone at which you deliver your communication as well. But we got cut off, so that's why we was kind of asking for a little bit more time so we could discuss on that. But I get his point that there are different levels of communication as well when it comes to tone and delivery and stuff like that.
Yeah, but I mean, excellent points, and I really appreciate that people are discussing it. We have some contributions in the chat as well. For the sake of time, I will ask everybody to just keep an eye on the chat to see what's being said there. But I definitely appreciate the contributions that we've had so far, and it's really wonderful to know that everybody's really getting their creative juices flowing. You're utilizing what you have experienced, what you know, what you've learned from before. So you really echoed what is on my next slide, which is that communication is definitely important. It is a critical element in the relationships between coaches and athletes, not just in team sports like football, but in individual sports as well. Some authors have suggested that it is, I like this middle point. Communication skills are the basis in relationship roles, and we will be discussing roles a bit later on. Remember that role ambiguity, and are acknowledged as a critical piece in the puzzle that is the art and science of coaching. Many things are a mixture of an art and a science, and so this is something I want you to think about as well. Yes, we can give you an equation for communication. We could say this plus this will equal, yeah, perfect communication. It's not exactly as easy as that. There is an art to it, and we will just ask you to gather the information, critically think about what we are presenting to you today, reflect on your own experiences and build on that. And that's where you get a nice combination of art and science to impact athletes in a positive way. And then of course, this is something that was said in the group I was in actually, communication skills are the most important skills for coaches to possess. Now, you could disagree with me, that's fine. We could debate it after. It is just a viewpoint from the literature, but it just, I think, reinforces why we will spend time looking at communication today. So, okay, we can agree that communication is important to coaching, but how exactly do you influence your players, and how does it influence their performance? Now, in the contributions we've just had, links have certainly been made. So I have just chosen 2 points that I wanted to highlight, 2 examples then of how coaches may influence their athletes, their well-being and their performance through communication. So let's look at the first one. So when coaches provide positive feedback to their players, research has shown that players are willing to work harder and that they are more willing to sacrifice for their team. So this is a direct, we can see direct links between the type of feedback a coach gives, and then what are the consequences of that for the player and then for the team, and by extension performance. On the other hand, when negative feedback is given, it has been shown to relate to be related to less teamwork amongst players on a team. So these are just examples of what certain studies have found. You might find it slightly different. Maybe you've had one-off experiences that have been different, but generally this has been the trend that has been shown. Another example I wanted to highlight is that positive and supportive feedback from coaches tends to lead to greater player self-efficacy or their confidence for a task. It's been shown to lead to greater intrinsic or internal motivation and team cohesion as well. So it's great for team building. So it's easy for us to think, okay, well, communication affects my players in these ways, but there are lots of different possible avenues for communication to have an impact on your players and by extension, their performance. So on that note, we want to talk about what are some of the things coaches should consider when they are communicating with players. What things are important in building that coach-player relationship? For this, I will hand over to Mr. Robertson to take over. And it actually references a lot of what you just spoke about, I'm sure, in your groups. So Jelani, up to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sammy. And you are absolutely right. I think the wonderful conversations that we had going from those breakout rooms were definitely leaking into this critical section here. So I just want to say thanks to everybody who contributed, because you all have definitely made my task a lot easier. So I appreciate everyone. So just to set the scene a little bit regarding these considerations. So this is obviously not it's not an exhaustive list by any means, right? But it's definitely some primary and essential considerations for coaches when considering or when thinking about communicating and how do you communicate. So we have sociocultural differences, the developmental stage and different developmental stages, learning styles, which has been referenced, gender, and last and certainly not least, yourself, right? So with regards to sociocultural factors, so according to the APA, sociocultural factors are the environmental conditions that play a part in healthy and adaptive behavior and well-being, or on the other hand, in maladaptive behavior. All right, and when we think about sociocultural factors, one of the main ones that especially impact communication is access to educational opportunities, right? And by this, I mean, for example, let's say you have a coach who prefers to speak in the Queen's English or standard English consistently throughout his feedback, his instruction giving, and so on. But he's coaching developing players from a rural and underserved community. And right away, you can start to imagine that the educational opportunities may not be as rich in these areas. And so understanding the choice of language that this coach prefers to use might be a challenge, and this might serve as a barrier. So it is definitely something to consider when trying to communicate with your different athletes. It's also possible that within group differences exist. So for example, you may be coaching one team that may have a variety of athletes from all sorts of sociocultural and socioeconomic backgrounds, differing levels of education and understanding and comprehension, etc. And so that in itself presents a challenge. You then have to make that decision as the coach. What is the best way, or how can I be most optimal with my communication, given that I am working with a diverse group of athletes? I don't envy you all for having to figure this out, but hopefully after today's conversation, it's just something you become a little bit more mindful about going forward. In terms of developmental stage, so youth athletes, so those generally from 6 to 11, this is a critical stage for the development of their self-confidence, and encouragement and commendation or praise is necessary, especially with a focus on effort over outcome. And that's because effort is controllable, and that's something that you want them to get an idea of from the very beginning. Early on, you want them to have this notion of, okay, I can make a difference with how hard I try, and it's not necessarily about win or lose, right? However, please take note and try to be careful not to bestow undue or excessive praise upon children in this developmental stage, because what tends to happen is they develop a little bit of arrogance and then may become slightly more uncoachable as the years go on, because apparently, because they've been filled with these lofty ideas of themselves, they can do no wrong. And that's not what we're trying to encourage in this stage. In terms of junior athletes, the development of identity, this is where they really look to find their sense of self. The age-old question, who am I? What am I good at? What do I need to work at, etc. And here is where positive reinforcement. So this just generally refers to trying to make desired behaviors more likely. What can I do to make this behavior that I want to happen, this good behavior, more likely? And it's often contrasted to punishment, right? So positive reinforcement and encouragement play a critical role here. And I said here, particularly from sources outside of the home, because this is the age, the teenage years, where other factors besides parents and relatives become crucially important and meaningful to kids, right? So friends, teachers, teammates, and critically coaches, right? Senior athletes, 19 and over, so this is where they need a strong sense of support. They need that network of support to go ahead and build a strong base for life. This is what gives them that confidence and that security to be the person that they have developed and then go out into the world. And this is where they require openness and sharing from coaches so that they can feel that sense of connectivity, that sense of support from a significant other in their life, because make no mistake about it. As a coach to an athlete, you are a significant other. You become a significant other in their life. Learning styles. So we've come across this, this has been brought up in different ways when we were just speaking. And traditionally, they are categorized as follows. There's visual, so those who learn better from seeing something happening, so that's whether on a video or maybe an actual demonstration. Auditory, as it suggests, hearing something, so people being able to describe things to them, they paint their own pictures. Reading and writing, individuals who best intake by reproducing material or simply just reading it and studying it. And kinesthetic, actually the actual effort of doing it. And this sounds all well and good, but unfortunately, no. So the research suggests that there is no actual effectiveness to catering to learning style, to catering to a specific learning style. None. There's no research which supports that if I cater my learning to an auditory learner to more auditory stimuli, then this means that they're going to be exactly better than if I had done it in another style. There's no research in over 20-something to 30-something years since this research initiated about learning styles that suggests this is effective, right? So what is recommended is to stick to best practices. Is there a best way to teach defensive formation? Is there a best way to teach applying certain curl to the ball? Is there a best way to teach heading? And so on and so forth. And here as well, I would encourage also mixing methods. All right, so yes, we have those traditional styles of visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and reading and writing. But seeing as there's no research that support using one of them to fit a certain individual, mix them. Right? Individuals tend to remember things that are different than what they're accustomed to. So I would encourage here the coaches to consider mixing their methods for maximum effectiveness and following and sticking to best practice. So sorry if I burst any bubbles there, but I thought it was necessary to just stick that in. Gender is another extremely important consideration, and there are various understandings and various considerations for this, for coaches, and that were relevant for coaching. So female athletes have been seen to tend to be more open and receptive to coaching in general, right? And to try new things, right? As compared to their male counterparts, a little bit more resistant. And I guess because of maybe the more confidence that tends to come with testosterone. I could leave that up to you all to decide why that is, but this is what the research has shown. Right? They have also been found to be more harshly self-critical And so therefore it kind of should start turning those gears in your head about, okay, if I'm working with a female team, do I need to add in even more critical feedback or harsh criticism to things when they are not done how I would like them to be, right? Female athletic confidence generally is more reliant or becomes more reliant on external factors. So they care, there's a huge importance on the impact of the thoughts of others about how well I do something or how consistently I'm able to execute, right? And so this is where they differ, I guess, from males who tend to show a little bit more internal sense of athletic confidence, right? In terms of task cohesion, this is highly valued by male athletes, and this just means they're working towards the same goal. Whereas for female athletes, social cohesion has been shown to be more meaningful to them. And if you want to just wrap your head around task cohesion, I draw your attention to maybe, hopefully you have some basketball fans in here. The 96 Bulls is a great example. On the court, excellent team. We know what they're about. One track mind, chasing the championship, etc. Off the court, they couldn't stand each other. so this kind of setup would not work for female athletes, generally speaking. Now, just remember, these are generalizations based on research and not exactly doctrine, right? But this is just what trends have tended to appear. So for female athletes, it's more important for them to get along so that they can be able to trust each other more off the pitch, but then crucially on the pitch as well. And there's one quote I think that kind of sums it up really nicely based on coach's experience over 20 years. And it says, for females, it might be more a case of ego boosting and really helping them believe in their abilities and that confidence. And for males, it might be a case of ego busting and really just trying to keep them grounded and instead focus not on just being the best, but focused on becoming better, focused on mastery, and really trying to find those different ways of improvement, despite however good they may or they may think they are. Last but not least, consider yourself, right? So what is your preferred method or methods of communication, right? It makes little to no sense to try to do something that is not you, because you may lose your effectiveness, right? All those other things, all those other considerations are all well and good. And I definitely encourage you to be mindful of them, but also be aware and mindful of your preferred method of communication. All right, so that you might be a player's coach, or you might be a strong tactician, but if I am to draw examples from famous coaches, I don't think Pep Guardiola would have the same success he would have if he applied Jose Mourinho's tactics and vice versa. All right, so it really is about what resonates with you and what you think works best for you. And finally, be mindful of your own stress levels. And I would go further saying not only stress levels, but be mindful of your own emotional states and your own internal states, because it definitely affects, as Nadine pointed out earlier, it definitely affects your message, the content, how often, everything, right? So especially during competition, stress has a way of negatively impacting your content of your feedback and how you deliver this feedback. So again, these are by no means, this is by no means an exhaustive list, but I just thought that these are some critical considerations just to be mindful of when communicating. I do not envy the task of the coach, but here's where I trust in your expertise and the art form that you all have to make things happen and to be effective when making things happen. So I pass it back on now to Dr. Sammy. Thank you.
Jelani, that was, when I saw these slides initially, I learned quite a few things myself, and I thought it was really put together. So hopefully our participants found the same. So let's go now into, so we talked about some of the base considerations for communication. They are important for several reasons, as Jelani outlined. One thing that, again, we're trying to guide here based on research on what we've experienced and what we've read and what coaches have spoken to us about. one thing that seems to crop up from time to time is role ambiguity. Now, communication has a very important part to play in reducing or lessening role ambiguity within team sports. So what is role ambiguity? Well, it's defined as a lack of clear information associated with a particular role. So, I mean, that's easy enough to understand, right? Lack of clear information associated with a particular role. Now, what are some of the roles a player might experience in football? It could be your position on the field. It could be the role of a left back, but it might also be the role of a leader, of a senior player, of somebody who's new to the team or the academy, to somebody who is, if you're coaching very young children, the role of a child who is now developing their social skills. So there are many different roles that a player would experience in the course of their footballing career, in the same way that you in your life would have experienced that before. So it's really important for athletes to be provided with well-defined and consistent roles and role responsibilities within any group. And I'll tell you what the research says in a second as to why. But I would like you to think back to, and I know many of you coaches would have played football before. You may play another sport, even think outside of sport in your work life. Have you ever been in a role where you weren't exactly sure what the role entailed? It wasn't particularly well defined, or your role kept changing, and you weren't able to adapt as quickly as you would have liked. Maybe you weren't sure what your responsibilities are. Did that create any negative consequences within you? I have certainly found that for me, and I'm thinking back to school days now, if I wasn't too sure what my role was within a group, within a classroom, within a project group, and I didn't know what the responsibilities were, it left me very uneasy and uncertain, and I wasn't sure what to do. Was I doing too much, too little? What were the consequences of that? So really, it can create a lot of confusion, of uncertainty, of anxiety within your players. So what research has found is that role ambiguity can negatively affect athletes in a number of ways, from their task self-efficacy or their confidence in performing a task, to their overall athlete satisfaction, to the performance of that role. And that role could be as a leader, as a left back, as a goalkeeper. So this is why role ambiguity, or trying to reduce role ambiguity, can be quite an important factor within any football team, and not just a team, within a group that, for example, trains together or learns skills together. So why bring this up? What can coaches do to help? What would your role be in reducing role ambiguity? Well, coaches can help the athletes understand a few different things. The first is their scope of responsibilities, and this is the extent of their responsibilities. So what is the let's look at a goalkeeper. So I know we have a couple of goalkeeping coaches in here, I've seen them. So help me out if you think I'm faltering with some of these examples. What is the extent of their responsibility as a goalkeeper? That's a very specific role. But more than that, what is their scope of responsibility as a player on the team or within the group? That is something coaches can be clear when you're discussing with your players, in this case, your goalkeeper. You can be clear, you can be concise with that goalkeeper of what the extent of their responsibilities are. Next, coaches can help athletes to understand their behavioral responsibilities. What are these? These are the behaviors necessary to successfully complete their role responsibilities. So not just behaviors, but actions. What are your responsibilities within that role? And I mean, this is not just something that benefits younger players who might not be sure. Within any change in team, there's a change in team dynamic as players get better, as players are injured, as they come back, as new things are introduced. With COVID, players might be very confused about some of these things, and not just players, but think about your support staff as well. So what are the behaviors necessary to successfully complete their role responsibilities? So thinking back to that goalie, what do they need to do in their role as goalkeeper? The next thing that you can help an athlete to understand via your communication is how their role performance will be evaluated. So what criteria will you use to judge their performance? So with a goalie, it might be pretty straightforward. Okay, you don't let any goals in, great. But it's not just that, is it? No footballing role is going to be just one thing. There will be various criteria that you use to evaluate performance. Helping players to understand what that criteria is then allows them the chance to develop what they need to work on. That they can strengthen their skills. If they know perhaps I'm not so great at XYZ, then they know, okay, this is what I need to do to get there. If they don't know what they need to do to get there, they can talk to you or teammates or read or reflect on their experiences. But they need to have the information to know what they need to do because of how they will be judged or evaluated rather than judged. The last thing is, what are the consequences of not fulfilling their role responsibilities? This is something I think it's very important for coaches to communicate to their athletes as well. So we're not necessarily going to stick on punitive action or what are the punishments or negative consequences, but do your players know if they do not, let's not say perform, but if they don't engage in certain responsibilities, for example, respect, what are the consequences of that? Is that clear? So some things will be clear. For example, if you are on a pitch and so goalkeeper and you get angry with the referee and you punch the referee, consequence is going to be, well, it's going to be a red card and you're getting sent off. But it's more than that, because what are some other consequences? Does your player understand that part of their responsibility as not just a goalkeeper, but a player on the team is to engage in sportsmanship, is to have respect for others, to respect authority. And apart from that red card, what are some of the negative consequences associated with that? Perhaps it's letting the rest of the team down because now it's 10 men or women out there without you. So I know this is a lot, it's very wordy, but the core thing that I want you to try to remember is that players tend to respond, and I'm sure you have found this. If you have not, please let us know. But what we found is that players tend to respond to well-defined, clear rules. They tend to respond to specific instructions, to boundaries, to parameters, particularly within a team sport and with you as the figurehead or the person in power, the person who is instructing. So I would encourage everyone to consider whether you are clear, whether you are concise with your players when it comes to their roles and their responsibilities moving forward. Because we want to, if we go back to our previous slide, we don't want role ambiguity to fester and then to lead to things like athlete dissatisfaction or to an athlete finding that they're not confident or to a team that is not cohesive. And I'm very happy Jelani mentioned team cohesion earlier. Okay, so that was just one small thing we wanted to focus on. We have another breakout room activity for you, this time based on what you've said before, and we were going to give you more time for this anyway. We're going to look at a scenario here. Now I'm going to let Jelani give you the outline of what this discussion is, because or the scenario is, because he's going to lead the discussion afterwards. So Jelani, do you want to take over?
Sure. Yeah. Once you're happy to just leave it here and control, I'm good to read. All right, so hopefully everyone can see the nice scenario up on the screen. If not, don't worry, I'm here. So Ruby is a 21-year-old player on your senior women's team, but recently you've noticed that she's been kind of off the game. So you put her aside after training one day to share your concerns. She opens up to you about experiencing conflict with her parents and admits that she didn't say anything before because she was afraid of looking weak and afraid of being cut. So my question to you as you descend into your breakout rooms, two things. What are some of the important considerations for you as coach in this situation, which would then inform question two? What would you say to Ruby? So I would encourage people to, if you're looking at the screen, to probably take a picture of the scenario, maybe take a screenshot, write down some important characteristics before we separate you into breakout rooms, so that you can have the case with you as you descend and separate into those breakout groups.
Just three of us.
Wait a minute, that is
Okay, no,
six of us. Yeah,
Six.
six.
I'm glad I could see that. Okay, so I'm just gonna do a little bit of admin. So I will encourage everyone to please please go with the discussion, and I will join in a second.
Just a reminder, I'll read it back again in case you all have forgotten. Ruby is a 21-year-old player on your senior women's team, but recently you've noticed she's been off game. So you pull her aside after training one day to share your concerns. She opens up to you about it.
A very
but if I mean, men are different to women, right? That's understood. If I'm thinking along the lines of that, you know, something is upsetting a player off the field, incidents are affecting a player's performance on the field, I think the first thing to do would be to take into consideration the players' feelings, you know, and how it's affecting them, rather than look at it from the team or the footballing aspect of it. All right. At least that's what I may do. And then probably tie it back in, you know, but make sure that that individual or that person is okay, or try to get some help for that person first.
Yeah. So there's a human element to the consideration as a coach, I guess, instead of just performance driven. It's not just about being cutthroat, you're not performing, get off the team kind of thing, but getting to the root cause of maybe why my athlete isn't performing, and then showing some empathy as the coach, I guess, to their family issues. In this situation, the conflict between her parents is what is affecting her. So
do you think that in general that if you have a male coach, which often happens in sport, that the female will be less likely to open up, and perhaps this is the importance of having a female team manager, etc. Do you think that really does make a difference?
Good question.
I think it's dependent on the culture that the male coach develops. You know, we don't often have very liberal, open feeling male coaches in Trinidad. Sometimes I meet a lot of progressive coaches who are willing to learn and advance and develop themselves, but we do have a lot of older coaches as well, from the generation of this is how I was coached, this is how I'm coaching you kind. And in that sort of one-track mind, sometimes it can, you know, the emotionality of it can get lost. And I think I certainly at least would have shied away from talking to my male coaches when I was in sport growing about any kind of emotional development or family stuff or anything like that. I wouldn't necessarily have confided in them, but perhaps you're right, a female counterpart. But if the culture of the coach is open and welcoming, and you know the coach demonstrates that level of empathy, not just, hey, how you going? Okay, good, all right, cool, and just go, they might feel more inclined or safe to. And of course then
with all the safeguarding now that's going on, and you know all the history, maybe it's something that has to be part and parcel of a process.
Yes, of coach education as well, 100%, because of course then there gets a line of, if this female athlete leans too much on the coach, does the coach understand where is the line to draw? I can't have an emotional relationship with this player beyond this point. They can express things to me and we work together and find solutions and whatnot. But then is there a dependency on me as their male, figure in their life kind of thing? So it really is a very tricky situation to navigate for male coaches coaching females. And I don't envy them at all. This is why I stuck female coach to female athletes.
It is,
Gail,
because even
how old is your daughter? How old is your daughter?
17.
Big
Right.
girl.
Yeah.
And does she play any sport, or has she played any sport?
Yeah, she plays football. She plays football.
Right. So therefore,
Right.
would you have seen that kind of scenario happening as now from the parent side? What would you have experienced anything where you would have thought as a parent it affected the way she played or she was involved in it? Because as parents, and I'm one of those, you kind of live especially with a child in sport, you're pushing them to get to the highest level.
You're living vicariously through them there.
Well, you see, I've learned a long while ago, because I have 2 boys as well, right? And my eldest son, I always wanted not to be his coach, right? Because as a parent and a coach, you kind of have to be different, right? So, but my daughter, knowing that I won't be coaching her in a sense in a team sport, right? I did a lot more personal coaching and thing with her, right? But that part of it, that aspect of it, I think I was more there. I would be more there as a parent.
I was just going to wonder if you were in a coaching scenario like that, would you see then the value of bringing in the parent and chatting with the parent without the knowledge of the athlete?
From a minor, yeah, it might happen. And I've coached boys where I see boys again, like I said, boys and girls are different, right? So I've coached troubled boys. Right? Who, when you look at their performance and you as a coach, you would know your players and you know something is wrong, right?
But you should.
Yeah, well, you should, yeah. And boys don't talk, right? Like I say, you may quicker get a girl to come out and talk about issues and explain, what is going on or is affecting her.
That's very true.
For boys, you have to really dig deeper.
And that stems to a cultural thing that we teach masculinity and non-emotionality in our young boys. So then is it, part of our coaching culture to encourage that development if they're not getting anywhere else, how?
Does everybody have the Zoom lady recording in progress?
We did.
Jelani, I'm gonna leave you to debrief.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sammy. Could you bring back up the slide, por favor? I think that'd be great. That'd be great. All right. So while there we go. So with the lovely discussion and scenario back up. Questions to the room. What kind of conversations were had? What were some important considerations? If you do remember your group number, that'll be great, but I think I'll take Nadine's approach here because remembering your group number might be a challenge. So if there anybody from groups in between 1 to 6 that would like to contribute, you can just raise your hand or unmute and you can give us an idea of what was going on in your group with these questions and this scenario. It's groups 1 to 6 represented. Oh, yes, Mr. Allen, you can go. Yes, Mr. Allen, you can go ahead and unmute and share some of your experiences in that group.
Right. Yes. Good afternoon, Bernard Adam. I'm from Group 6. To those that know me, I'm from Tobago, one of the coaches from Tobago here. Right. Well, we didn't have time to get to the second part of the question, but for the first part, for the the important considerations, we were thinking that the nature of the conflict would be important for us going forward to discussing the situation with the player, whether it was something related to the sport or the game, or whether it was something personal between her and the parents that was causing the conflict, before we could go forward into actually knowing what we would say to the player. Unfortunately, after that, we ran out of time.
So, Ms. Alam, if I may be so bold as to put you on the spot. So let's say it was simply about something, something at home, and they refuse to say anything more, but just to let you know that something is going on. What would you say? There's no right or wrong answer here, but you're representing Group 6, so go on.
All right. It being something at home, and her not wanting to divulge any further information, then I would have to ask her to deal with what is happening at home. Try not to bring it into the game, but do offer my support that, if any time they do need to talk about it, then, she can come to me, in the future. But if it's something that you don't want to discuss and it's not related to the game, you have to start to sectionize, because I think it was the senior national team or something like that, senior women's team. So it's not it's senior women's team, so it's not children, right? So that sort of age group, as I said, I offer my support, in going forward, but it's something that you would have to deal with,
Yeah, no, I think, given the your hands might very well be tied in that situation, but I think 100% right that offering your support may just be the best course of action there, in terms of letting her know you're available, and if anything come up further and she would like to discuss it, that you are there for her. That's a great point. Thank you very much for taking up that challenge, Mr. Alam. Yes, Lyndon, John, your contribution, what was the conversation like in your group? What would you say to Ruby? We are all ears. Oh, did we lose Lyndon right as he was about to speak?
Oh. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, we are.
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah.
Nice and clearly. Yes, Lyndon.
Yeah,
Lyndon hearing you.
Yeah, that's.
Are you hearing me? Yeah.
Yes, Lyndon, all clear.
Yeah, I was saying in our group, we were saying the first thing is to let her know that she's in a safe environment, a safe space, that there's no sign of weakness or her needing to worry about being cut or anything like that. It's just that as the coach, we have identified that her level of play, something was wrong, and we are now trying to discuss what the situation is. And that there's nothing wrong with her in terms of her physical or football. It's just that we noticed that something is off. And we want to find out what that something is, whether she wants to talk about it or not. It's important that she knew that she's in a safe space, and that as coaches, we care, and that we want her to know that we want the best from her, whether, it's from a footballing standpoint, an emotional standpoint, and there's no weakness in, because she's female, in not being able to show her emotion. All right. And then the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, her wheel needs to be balanced for her to perform anyway. So it could be football, it could be food, it could be whatever. Similarly, emotionally, she needs to be, all of these different facets need to be in unison for her to be able to play well. And we are concerned with her playing well every day, all the time, no matter what the situation is.
Then, did you all happen to have a psychologist in your group? Because that sounds like something Dr. Sammy or my colleague Amanda would say as well.
I feel Amanda was in that group too.
No, we did not. No, we did not. No, we did not.
No, but honestly, we probably could not put it better ourselves. And it is definitely, as somebody mentioned, a case of putting the person first, right? If the person is not in a good place, then there's no way you can expect ideal performance or optimal performance from the athlete. And just letting them know, or letting her know in that instance that it's a safe space. This does not impact, your position or your standing or how we see you. Then that alone, that comfort alone, plays a massive role when it comes to that support network that is critical for athletes at this stage. So that is brilliantly said, and thank you so much for that contribution, Lyndon, and his esteemed group of non-psychologists.
Yes, group two.
Thank you very much, group two. Was there anybody else that we can? I think we have time for one more. Anybody else who wants to? Yes,
Daniel.
Daniel. Yes, Daniel.
Yes. With our group, one of the things that we came upon was the cultural aspect of it, because as we were discussing, we were saying that as an adult, because one of the participants was saying that you would talk to the parents, and while we were saying that at 21 she's an adult, our colleague mentioned that in the Western Hemisphere, 21-year-olds might be out on their own, but where he is from, even at 21, a discussion with the parents would be held. So looking at the culture of where you are, because as I said, it's your senior national women's team. So we were thinking from a Trinidadian perspective, and he was thinking from his perspective. So in the different cultures, how you deal with the issues would vary. So that's one of the major things that we looked at, and also in terms of providing support for the player. One of the other contributions said, again, he was from the US. He said if there's a possibility of finding a psychologist that might be able to help any assistance that he as a coach could provide after discussions with the player. So from a Trinidad perspective, we would try to recruit the values of EDPU and see if we could have some kind of discussion with that as well.
I think honestly there's some planting going on in terms of the groups, because I couldn't put that better myself. Definitely cultural considerations play a part, and your group has brought up a really critical element of the study of this scenario. And I would like to say that definitely identifying what is available in terms of support, in terms of resources that can help you manage this situation, will also be a really good channel in terms of trying to get to the bottom of things and trying to support the athlete in this case. So thank you so much, Damien and group, for that contribution. And I would love to hear from everyone else. I'm so sorry, Yannick and Michael, but if you could just put your contributions into the chat so that we don't lose them, so that we still hear from you, because it seems like this scenario has generated a lot of meaningful conversation, which is exactly what we're hoping for. So please put your contributions in the chat for everyone to see. Thank you all so much for your input and conversations. It was truly rich. And now I hand you back over to the capable hands of Dr. Nadine Sammy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jelani. You're an excellent moderator. I will note this for future workshops. When I ask you very politely if you will help. I really appreciate the discussion. I mean, we had great discussion in the group I was in. Some of it was reflected in the contributions we had. We've got people writing in the chat as well. So we really, really appreciate your engagement, your feedback, your interacting with us. So we move now into the final section of the PowerPoint slides, and then we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A. So the last thing I want to focus on, like I mentioned in far back in our outline slide, there's two authors, Small and Smith, and they've done a lot of sports psychology research into coaching. In 2006, they published a paper which kind of summed up their findings from their own large-scale observational studies, as well as a few other studies. And they looked at, multiple elements of coaching in the context of sports psychology. One of the things they looked at was communication, believe it or not. So what they found in large-scale observational studies, Small and Smith found, they observed over 80 coaches. They coded 85,000 plus behaviors in these coaches, over time. So they looked at them in training and in game scenarios, and they coded 85,000 plus different behaviors. Now, a behavior could be something as small as a thumbs up to a player, or something like saying something to them like, cross the ball in from the left. So there's lots of different types of behaviors that were coded by Small and Smith. They also got feedback from the players. So they used interviews, they used questionnaires, and interacted with nearly 1,000 athletes that these 80 plus coaches coached. And here's what they found. So athletes tended to respond positively to coaches who engage in high levels of reinforcement for both desirable performance, but also desirable effort. Because even though you may put in 100% effort and do everything on paper that's right one day in a game situation, you may not achieve the performance outcomes that you had hoped to achieve. But athletes appreciated that coaches would reinforce and praise the effort that they put in, even if they did not get the performance results. Of course, coaches also praised good performance. So it certainly depends on context, but athletes tended to respond well to both of these. So an example of some of the positive reinforcement that these coaches engaged in, and here they gave a list of non-verbal forms of communication. Things like a pat on the back, a smile, applause, a friendly nod. Now, whether you choose verbal or non-verbal communication, I think will depend on several of the factors we've discussed previously. When you think about the scale, the size of a football pitch, if you want to communicate something to a player who is far on the other side, that may not be the best time when you shout praise at them. Can you get your message across in an effective way? Perhaps you clap your hands to let them know that they've done well in that scenario. So what I would encourage you as coaches to do, consider when are times that you would have engaged in positive reinforcement for performance and effort. Do you always go to a certain, is it always verbal? Is it non-verbal? Is it a mix? And what does that depend on? Perhaps the player, perhaps the context, perhaps the time. The next thing they found is that coaches who are generally positive and encouraging led to athletes who were not just happier and more fulfilled, but who performed better overall. So in an environment where athletes feel that they are supported and encouraged, they tend to do better mentally, and that tends to lead to more effort and sometimes better performance. Better performance is usually always the hope, but as we have said, it doesn't always work out in the way that we hope. The last thing is coaches who responded to mistakes with encouragement and also technical instruction were preferred by athletes. And on the next slide, the next two slides, in fact, we will look at how coaches may respond to players who make mistakes or maybe don't perform as well as we would have hoped. So these are just general guidelines based on the Small and Smith and a few other studies that they reported on. This is what athletes really seem to respond to. Now, like we said, throughout this workshop, these are just guidelines. You may have found something slightly different, and please, by all means, put it in the chat. Let's discuss it after, because we can learn from each other. So, some recommendations. The first one is when giving instructions, coaches should be clear and concise. I think everybody knows this. It's certainly come up before in the workshop. It's come up through your feedback in the group discussions. It's come up several times when we've talked on different slides, for example, lessening role ambiguity. It's very important to be clear and concise in your communication. What about regarding mistakes? Well, according to Small and Smith, they found that there's 3 keys to giving mistake contingent technical instruction. So what does it include? Well, it includes knowing what to do. If you don't know what to advise your player in terms of a technical or even a tactical sense, then you might leave that player even more confused afterwards. So we're thinking now, okay, a player has made a mistake or has had a setback, and these are guidelines for how you would communicate with them after that. So the first thing is you need to know what to do. So you need to have the necessary football knowledge if you're going to give technical instruction. That seems self-explanatory. The next thing is how do you actually do it? Now they reference the teaching learning approach. This just means that you engage in a purposeful sequencing of teaching and learning over the course of time, dependent on that player's developmental stage, on their age, on their needs. So you wouldn't necessarily use, say you have a player who is now learning certain football skills, you wouldn't necessarily use a lot of technical jargon that they might not be familiar with if you're trying to correct a mistake. So consider where they're at in terms of their developmental stage, in terms of where they're at learning wise. Also consider things like, if we go back to that very first table when we talked about barriers to communication, what is their level of understanding? What is their level of comprehension? And so you adjust your teaching or your coaching to those needs. And the last thing is when to do it, or consider the timing that you give feedback when it comes to mistakes. So some players will respond well when you correct them immediately after. Some players may need you to talk them through it after the session or away from the group. Now, we're very much aware that, you know, it's not, you don't always have the time in which to take each player and go through things with them. So like we said, these are just guidelines, and you will know what works best for you. What we wanted to do is to present this information to encourage you to start thinking about how you give feedback after players make mistakes. So Small and Smith actually, this is a basketball specific example, but we can certainly adapt this to football. So they suggested a 3-part teaching approach when correcting a mistake, when dealing with a setback. The first thing is to start with a compliment. For example, way to hustle, you ran a really good pattern. So this is intended to reinforce the desirable behavior. And it creates an open attitude on the part of the athlete, hopefully. So you start off with letting them know, okay, you've done a good job, you know, you ran a really good pattern is what they use here. Second thing is to give a future-oriented instruction. For example, if you follow the ball all the way into your hands, basketball example, you'll catch those just like a pro does. I didn't want to change it because I wanted to be true to what Small and Smith put in their paper. Emphasize the desired future outcome rather than the negative one that's just occurred. So again, just guidelines. You might think it is more important to acknowledge what they have not done well. So maybe it is clear to them what they have not done well, and then build on that, which is in opposition to what is here. So like we said, just guidelines. And the third thing is end with another positive statement. For example, hang in there, you're going to get better even if you work at it. So you start to put this together. So you start by acknowledging what they've just done well, even if technically they haven't done something well, maybe they put a lot of effort into that. So you can start with a comment on their effort. Then give the future-oriented instruction. In this case, I would say have some freedom here. What do you think is best? Do you think it's best to say, okay, this is what maybe didn't go well there, or, you know, acknowledge what didn't go well so that you can then build on instruction for that going forward. And then you end with a positive statement, something that's positive, something that's encouraging, particularly because, as I'm sure you have found, some footballers, when you engage in those kinds of talks with them, when you are pointing out what didn't go as well as you had hoped, they may become discouraged, and sometimes they need that extra bit of encouragement to keep them going. Now, some authors have disagreed that this is the best way to do it. Small and Smith have suggested that they have had much success, or coaches have had much success with this approach. So what I want you to do is, and we won't do this now for the sake of time, but what I want you to do is use this as a base, see what you agree with, see what you don't agree with, speak with your fellow coaches, utilize that WhatsApp group later today, tomorrow, in the week. Discuss whether you think this is the best approach and what works for you, and maybe what you can amend. And then hopefully you will come to a place where you can say, I'm gonna try this, or this hasn't worked so well because maybe somebody else has done it, and you can learn from them. Something that was very noteworthy from the Small and Smith paper is that coaches were, so remember, 85,000 plus behaviors they observed, but coaches for the most part weren't aware of how they behaved. And I find this very interesting because a lot of us think we know how we behave in an everyday scenario. But have you ever really taken time to reflect on your behaviors, particularly in the heat of the moment, when you are training, when you're trying to impart a skill, when your team is playing and you're is 2-0 against you? Do you really consider how you react in those situations? Perhaps not. Now, we encourage you to obtain feedback. So you may do this by speaking with your assistant coaches or support staff, sharing descriptions, giving each other feedback. Now, I am very aware that perhaps sometimes that is not going to work for you and your team, maybe based on the personalities, maybe based on context. So if that's the case, that is absolutely fine. The second suggestion is to ask for input directly from your athletes. Now, you have to be in a place where you are able mentally and emotionally to handle the feedback that comes your way. Sometimes we think we want feedback. We're like, yes, I'm real open. I could take it. Tell me, give it to me straight. Are you really in a place where you're able to hear things that maybe you don't necessarily agree with? Do you get defensive? Are you truly open? Are you sure that you will not engage in any kind of, will there be fallout for players if they speak with you honestly? So for these two, I would really encourage some self-reflection before you engage in these. One of the last thing is self-monitoring. So observe and start to record your own reactions, your own behaviors, your own patterns of communication. And this really has the potential to increase your awareness of how you communicate, of how you behave in certain contexts, of what behaviors lead to what actions. What are the thought patterns that go through your head when something occurs? And the reason we wanted to kind of close off with this is because self-awareness is really one of the first steps in improving any kind of mental skill, any kind of psychological component. So we have given you a lot today to think about. We've suggested many things, like I said, based on research, experiences, chats. Use these as guidelines. Critically think about them. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Bounce ideas off fellow coaches. Go back into your when you would have done your coaching modules, your coaching education. See what's said there. Think about how you communicate. What has worked? What has not worked? Listen and learn from others and reflect on your own behavior and communication patterns. So a few things to consider. The first is always remember that communication skills can be learned, and not just communication skills, many other things can be learned and can be developed as you go forward. Several variables influence coach-player communications. So, I mean, we've made reference to this throughout the workshop today. I think Jelani did a great job at giving outlines of what some of these are and what they entail. So it's something I think I would encourage everybody again to start thinking about. I'm sure you would have known many of these, if not all already, but hopefully we've reminded you of some of the things that you might need to know. Next is effective communication helps to lessen role ambiguity. And like we said, players really crave, or from what we have read, what we have seen, they seem to crave well-defined roles, structure, when they are engaged in training and even in match situations. So what is your role in lessening role ambiguity? How can you use your communicative skills to lessen role ambiguity? athletes tend to respond well to positive feedback after a good performance. And certainly when they put effort in. Corrective instruction along with encouragement after a performance mistake is encouraged. So you let the athlete know what they might need to do to improve on the mistake they've just made, or to correct it, or however you'd like to lay it out. And the last thing is technical instruction plus a moderate amount of general encouragement unrelated to how they've just performed is also encouraged. So if you can't praise, or if you don't necessarily want to praise performance because it was perhaps a less than ideal performance, what can you praise? Can you praise effort? Is there some other technical element that you can praise? If you can't think of anything in that case, you're a bit stuck. Can you encourage instead? Can you help that athlete to think future oriented? Can you give them a pat on the back and say, if you work at it, it will get better? And the last thing is that increasing self-awareness is very important in improving communication skills. And more than communication skills, like I said, lots of other mental skills that will contribute to your overall your coaching profile, your repertoire. Because remember, it's not just an art, it's not just a science, it is a combination of both of those. So we've come quite down to the wire pretty much. These are just some of the, all of the studies that we cited in the workshop today. These are all the references. And we admittedly don't have a lot of time. I will pop my email address in the chat if you wanted to follow up about anything after that we don't have a chance today, but I will ask Jelani just to unmute if you have anything to say to wrap up, and then we'll take a couple questions.
I just want to say before the questions, thank you guys so much, because it really was the conversations, it was the questions, the contributions from you all that made this as rich as it has been. And we are so grateful and thankful for your contribution and participation. It's definitely made it what I think a really good workshop. So if there are any questions, I think we have time for at least a couple, but as Nadine said, we will put our email addresses in the chat box, and we are feel free to contact us with anything that we can't cover right now.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please go ahead. Please do.
Right. Sometimes you get differing information with regards to how you pass on information to your players. They say you shouldn't shout at them. They say you should be able to call them apart. They say do it over the top and all those stuff. And you should know the age group and all those stuff. But in the heat of the moment, sometimes you get carried away. You got to do something. You see an emergency. Does that make you a bad communicator?
Great question, Collins. So first and foremost, I tend not to use the word bad or good. I guess the question is it as effective as it could be in that moment? The answer is it doesn't. Let me answer your question straight. So no, it doesn't make you a bad communicator. All right. I think it's very key that we acknowledge how human we all are, and how susceptible to feelings and the different ways that emotions blow us from time to time. We're not, even as coaches, you're not impervious to these things. All right. So I think the critical thing is, as Nadine was talking about, is trying to be self-aware and trying to have that awareness of when you are at that point, what do you need to do for yourself to get to a point that you can deliver an effective message? All right. So even if that means taking 5 extra seconds before you respond, take those 5 extra seconds. If that means taking 10 seconds, do what you think in that moment is what you need to give yourself a little bit of distance from the emotion that may be arising in you, so that you can effectively communicate your message to the individual. I hope that answers. Okay, great. I hope that answers your question.
Jelani, do you mind if I jump in and add on to your answer?
Absolutely, don't mind at all, team lead.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think I just want to also build on Jelani's answer of, being human and making mistakes. And also knowing as coaches, rightly, like what the question Jelani presented earlier, is that we have the opportunity there to also make corrections. So let's just say in the moment that would have happened, how do you now respond after the fact? Do you call your players in? Do you explain the situation? And that in itself helps build communication. So players themselves know that although these things can happen, I always have a chance to correct myself and make it better. So it will be great if you get it on the spot, but also knowing how you address these things afterwards will also impact how you communicate with players, and vice versa, how the players communicate with you.
Thank you very, very much, Amanda. And because of time, Jason, can you ask your question, please? Please.
Sure. Thank you very much. Good day, everybody. My question is a simple one. Now, I have private sessions, and I actually have a youngster that I've been two minds in terms of whether or not I've been sending the right messages. He's 9 years old, 8 or 9 years old, and his dad is somebody that I coached at some point, and his father plays football with him, and his father lets him in all the time because his son doesn't seem to deal well with losing. Now, the father has contributed to some of my activities as a coach. So, I do some work with his children as, as recompense for that. So when I play with his children, I do not let them win, but I make it very challenging. So it's like they're competing against me and they're doing well, doing a really good job. They were almost there. They were leading up the last 3 minutes and I come back and I win and that type of thing. And the son has once, maybe twice, thrown a little bit of a tantrum for losing. But it got to a point where he's always eager to come back and play me the next day. He always looks forward to coming back. And the thing is that I'm wondering whether or not I am adding the right support or creating the right environment, because I don't want it to be that the youngster is now having problems with losing and not communicating with me about it. He doesn't throw the tantrums anymore. But and again, what I'm encouraged by is the fact that he's always looking forward to coming and playing again. But should I not bend to the pressure of him wanting to win? Or is it constantly not allowing him to win going to be a negative for him, do you think?
So I can start first and then Dr. Sammy, if you, okay, so I would just like to say thank you so much for that lovely scenario. I should have used that for the workshop. But in terms of whether you're doing the right thing or the wrong thing, again, I don't like to deal in those extremes. But I would say if we follow the research and go back and tie it back into those psychosocial stages of development, that's 6, you said 9 years old, and that's right in between that 6 to 11 group where developing confidence is critical, but also tempering it with not giving away excessive praise and undue recognition. And I think if we follow the research like to the T, it seems according to that you're doing a good job along those lines of just trying to make sure that the athlete's self-confidence develops, not just in terms of just getting praise all the time and recognition, but it comes from a place of that effort. It comes from a place of that willingness, that consistency and that intensity that keeps them coming back. And once you keep, I think, recognizing this and pointing out to the athlete that this, is what will result in the outcomes that they would like, I think continuing the path that you're doing is a good choice, especially considering the other type of support that they might be getting. So according to the research, I think you're on a good path. And maybe Dr. Sammy has something else she would like to add to that.
Yeah, I feel like Amanda has something she wants to add. I can see it in her face, so I'm gonna turn it off.
Oh, you guys know me so well. I would say I agree with Jelani on a lot of things, but we also have to understand the message that we're sending, because then how does our athlete later on cope with fear of failure? So what I will say is, instead of focusing on winning and losing, focus more on achieving goals within each of your sessions. So if it is you have to score 3 goals, you score 3 goals, yes, you've achieved it, we'll move on to, you know, working up to 5 goals, etc. We don't always want to send the message winning and losing, because in sport there can always be one winner and many losers. So we want the athletes to focus more on growth and development versus, you know, winning or losing. That's just my 2 cents.
Oh, well said, Amanda. And I'll take 2 more questions. And guys, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. I'll get them to Dr. Sammy and Jelani, and I'll send it back out to you guys. So Yannick, quickly, can you ask your question, please? Yannick, please.
Hi, everybody.
Sorry, Yannick, you're muted. So you have to unmute yourself. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I don't know. It was just, I just clicked it and thing. But my question is there anything such as too much positive feedback? Now, obviously, there's going to be too much. There's going to be negative feedback. There's a lot of negative feedback. You don't want to give a lot of negative feedback, although there's some special cases that some athletes may thrive off it. But is there something as too much positive feedback? So you keep, you know, positively reaffirming them, saying they're doing everything good. But maybe some athletes would like to reassure that, hey, is there something that I could do to make me better at the skill? Is there something that, you know, I could do better in terms of my, like, in terms of all-around game? So is there anything such as too much positive feedback that you could give to athletes?
I just tried to unmute like 3 times and it didn't work. So that's a really interesting question. I think it's all about how you phrase it. Positive feedback doesn't necessarily mean, you know, you're doing everything really well, but you could frame, it's kind of like criticism and how we say constructive criticism. So we want to create an atmosphere where players feel safe enough to receive information that will help them to grow and develop. So I'll give an example. So it could be a case of, yes, we certainly want to recognize where what you might not be doing optimally, and then what you can do to improve. So language, and we can spend an entire session or more on language and the language you choose and the words you choose. So I guess the idea is we want to create a positive environment, one that encourages players and coaches to have interaction and conversations about where they can improve. So it's not just necessarily praising them all the time. It's creating that environment in which we could have those conversations. So I would say, let's construct a mix of being realistic. I don't know, Jelani or Amanda, would you call it like being realistic about where you are at and then evaluating performance going forward in that way?
Yeah, I have nothing to add there. I think that was excellently put, Dr. Sammy.
It's a very interesting question though, because I now think that based on these slides, it did come across very much as positive feedback. So I think it's a really good question, and I'm very happy that we were allowed the chance to at least talk on it for a minute. And
I'm going to end by giving the last question. And this question is for any one of the panelists. I remember talking to one of the top coaches in the world, and he said to me that I asked him if he believes in a psychologist for his team, and he asked, what surprised me is that he said, no, I wouldn't call the coach's name, it's just one of the premiership teams, and he said to me, if he cannot motivate the players, then he thinks he's not doing a great job. So he said the club obviously can afford to have a psychologist. And what was your view in terms of that, as opposed to this is your specialty as a psychologist, and the coach thinking that he is the person to do
it? I think everyone might want to put in. So let me just say my 2 cents first and then run. So, Coach, so I actually, when I was getting into sports psychology, we had the luxury of having a first team coach come and speak to us at our university. I would again not call any names here, but in that experience, he said in no uncertain terms, he spoke a lot about, you know, I guess it really came back to a fear of having, you know, a member of support staff like this with so much knowledge in this. And then he turned it into kind of ways of finding, oh, well, they wouldn't understand the football culture and this, that, and the other. And ever since that day, Mr. Lafoucault, I have not been a fan of this individual. Later on, I would go on to actually work in his academy, but I digress. And I think it's important in a case like that to underscore that we are not there to threaten. We are not there to take over. We are not there to do your job for you. We are there to support. We are there to supplement efforts that are already being done. And we are there, as the name suggests, because we're part of the support staff, we're supporting players, yes, but you as coach are the head of what we do. We don't work without you. We can't work without you. And so just trying to get that message across very clearly that we're not there to try to apply for his position, but actually there to try to make his profile look even, bolster his profile, whether that's, how we interact with the players or whether that's how we interact to the players through him. So I think that's how I would address that. And I'm going to leave it to the rest of the panelists now.
And I really want to hear from Amanda and Nadine, please.
I want to hear from Amanda too, because I noticed her smiling plenty.
I mean, I'm sure Jelani, Nadine, any of these sports psychologists that have ever worked have encountered this at one point or the other. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take it right back to the workshop on communication. I think what happens a lot of the times is that coaches have that barrier to communication when it comes to sports psychology, because maybe they have not requested enough info, had discussions with sports psychologists, and really are not aware of their own biases and their own, rightly as Jelani said, their own threats towards our field. So I do think, and I'm going to give it a very helpful message going forward, is that if you as a coach do feel some sort of hesitation, it would be really beneficial to you to have a conversation and have that open communication with a sports psychologist to really understand what our field is and how we can assist you in the background, because anybody who knows me knows I am in the background. Please do not highlight me. Let me hide and do my work, and make you as a coach look better. And I think that as coaches, it's really important to have that knowledge and to communicate, because this is what the whole session is about, communicate better, to build that knowledge and to build the field and to essentially become a better coach with better players that are performing.
Excellent, excellent. And Dr. Sammy?
I echo Jelani and Amanda's sentiments. And I mean, I think the big thing, like Amanda was saying, is come and talk to us and find out all of what we do, because it's more than just motivation. There are so many different facets of sports psychology. So I have also encountered, funnily enough, a Prem rugby coach in England at one of the top clubs, and he thought sports psychology was quite important at the academy level, but didn't want it on his team because I could motivate my players. So what I need a sports psych for, but it's so much more than that. And we can support coaches, as Jelani was saying, in a multitude of ways. So, talk to us, find out the info, and let's work together, because there's so much we could offer more as part of your support staff, as part of a partnership. And I think it could only, provided you're working with a professional, then I think there's the only place you could go is up.
Thank you very, very much. And Amanda, just quickly, 2 words, please, to further encourage coaches to because what I like with the presentation, I'll be honest, is you guys are not just giving facts, you're giving scientific facts with data, with research. And I'll be honest, this has inspired me to start, to want to do more, to find out more about the field. I wouldn't necessarily say get a degree in it, but at the same time, I want to make sure I'm getting the best out of my players by way of communication. And there's so much to learn, so much to learn. So Amanda, any words of encouragement for our coaches again, please?
Thanks, coach. Actually, when I was a junior player, Lafoucault was my coach. What would I really want the coaches to take away from this? I mean, Nadine and Jelani, incredible job. I'm sorry I wasn't able to present alongside you all, but I am on national duty right now, so I wasn't able to dedicate all the time. But of course, you guys did a fantastic job. I know this was a lot of material to digest, but I know that something struck a chord with each of the coaches, whether it's that one thing that you want to take away and start using into, your common practice. I would definitely say that something that we all speak about is having a good coaching philosophy, and communication is really the pinnacle of that. It directs how everything else happens. So when you take a look at your coaching philosophy, think about how communication drives that. Think about the culture that you want to develop within your team. Think about the common language that everyone will understand, so that anyone else coming in will fall into place and understand that this is what the team is about. And again, communication drives this. And I will, really want to also just encourage the coaches to be aware of their own biases and their own perceptions, because that again colors how you would communicate with your athletes. So it's not easy being a coach. I know a lot of people look at it and, undervalue what you do, but you are shaping the future, you are shaping people. So to be better coaches as well, on top of, having really strong communication, is to understand and be aware of, just like what Nadine and Jelani said, of what your own barriers to communication would be. So I encourage everyone to take some time away from this, digest the material, and see how you can move forward and just become better coaches through using information like this.
Thank you very much, Amanda, and welcome. Thank you for taking the time. Of course, you are abroad at this time. Thank you very much. So what we're going to do, I'm going to ask Tobias to say a few words, and then Mrs. Knott will give us our usual closing off. But before I do that, I want to ask, is he still on the call? Collins, is it Ugwu? Colin,
Yeah.
where are you from? Where are you from, sir?
Well, I'm from Nigeria.
Oh, thank you very much. Welcome. And what is amazing, we have coaches from Canada and the USA and the Caribbean also on the call. So the message is spreading. And Colin,
Actually, I live in Trinidad. I live in Trinidad.
Cool.
Yeah, I live in Trinidad. I've been in Tobago for years. Just came to Trinidad anyway. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. We're really glad to have you. Really, really glad to have you, and welcome. I hope you enjoy your stay, however long you're staying for. So without any further ado, I'm going to ask Mr. Tobias to please say a few closing comments, please.
Afternoon again. I could not be prouder to have led this team, to continue to lead this team. Just to chime in on the coaching comment, as someone who worked on a technical staff for the senior men's team, we have teams that travel with 3 coaches, a head coach, 2 assistant coaches, a goalkeeping coach, a kit man, a massage therapist, a fitness coach, a physiotherapist, a doctor, right? Because we see all these things as key to have specialists in. Yet on the field, we expect players to manage stress, to think on their feet, to make decisions based on the knowledge that you all have imparted as coaches, based on what you expect. And I'm sure at some point in time, if you haven't already and you continue in this coaching profession, you're going to experience somebody, you're going to be like, oh gosh, this player doesn't cope with pressure. Oh gosh, this player loses focus at the wrong time. And other such examples. And at that point, a sports psychologist would have been key in your toolkit, along with that full bench of non-playing professionals that also contribute to the game output. Now, I understand that we have a breadth of coaches from academy level come up, but just looking at the question in terms of, or the provocation in terms of the head coach at the top level, that would be my viewpoint. I believe in specialist tools to get the best result. Right? Everybody has a preference when it comes to devices, headphones, setup, all kind of things. And I think we should treat our athletes the same. And I'd like to congratulate all the coaches who came out today and interacted as well. There was no big name club, there was no foreign voice, but you all still came out to get what you all could from the team, and I really, really appreciate that because it says a lot about each of you that are on this call today. So thank you very much. Enjoy the weekend, stay safe, stay dry.
Thank you very much, Tobias, for those very wise words. And before I get to Mrs. Knott, just one more person from the Normalization Committee, the FIFA Normalization Committee, Mr. Gomez, can you just say a few words on behalf of the committee, please?
Sure, Dion, and let me just say simply fantastic. Jelani and Nadine, supported by Amanda, simply fantastic sharing of information. You guys are a natural team, and the material that you have shared with us was just so on point and so critically important to all of us, including coaches, administrators, anybody that is working with a team of people. And of course, we are dealing here in sport. Tobias, I completely agree with you that the role of a sports psychologist is fundamentally important, should be part of the toolkit that coaches should leverage. I think it is underestimated and perhaps even undervalued. And this is really critical. So Jelani, Nadine, Amanda, tremendous contribution today. Really insightful. Thank you so much for taking the time. And I think we ought to have you guys again with us at some point in the future because, listen, this was just what needs to be shared with all of us. So thanks again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gomez. Thank you very much. And Mrs. Knott. Where's Mrs. Knott? Mrs. Knott, I know you been.
Yeah,
you were taking notes. You were taking notes. I saw you writing, Mrs. Knott.
Definitely. And I just want to, of course, the sentiments of everybody. And if you look in the chat, it's just been one after the other. The coaches have really appreciated this. They've really appreciated all the comments. I just want to come back to you, Dion, and your everybody in. And the session today, this 2-hour session, you would not have been able to get this in any coaching course. And so I really want to congratulate Dr. Sammy, Jelani, Amanda, Tobias. I mean, the value that they would have had, all of us as coaches, administrators, the value we got in these 2 hours would be never given to us in any type of coaching course. So it has been really top value. Really everybody in. I think the reality is that if we're going to go forward in sport, we definitely need the support of sports psychologists. I mean, that's a given now. The reality also is that with the current COVID pandemic and the lack, people haven't been in sport, the whole question of how you get people motivated again is not going to be an easy one for not only sport administrators, coaches. If they think they're going back out there and it's going to be business as usual, forget it. So we're going to be even more dependent on people like the EDPU. So please, coaches, you've had a great session for free. Well done. I see Jason trying to push in a little consultancy there, but Jelani gave him a good answer, so that was great. And, best of luck to all of you, and stay safe, please do. But once again, fantastic session. And as I said, it's all there in the chat. Everybody's saying how wonderful it was. Agree with Nicholas, you need to come back. Maybe not just for football, for all sporting disciplines. So,
well said, Mrs. Knott. On behalf of the Trinidad Tobago Football Association as well, thank you everybody for attending. There's a guy who actually came like 12:15 to wait to get in. This is Andrew Harrington. Andrew, I want to commend you. Every week you've been on, and coaches like yourself who have been coming on every week. That says volumes. And Andrew said to me earlier, He's been making it his point to tell all the coaches, don't miss, don't miss, don't miss. We're going to get something new this week, and that's so fantastic. So I want to commend you, Andrew. Guys, as you know, we have given you the link to download the seminars. Please do so as soon as possible, especially seminar 1 and 2, because we have to find room to put more seminars up. Tomorrow we have There Is Hope seminars for kids. We have Carlos Edwards from 2 to 3:30. So you guys, you can message us. If you have players that you want to get them on, players between the ages of 10 to 19, Carlos Edwards is going to do a motivational talk with the kids. So we're really happy for that as well, because there is hope. And thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming. Let's stay safe. Go Trinidad Tobago. We're playing against Barbados this afternoon. Bahamas this afternoon. And games are not won on paper, but we anticipate that we should do well. So let's go TNT and give the support. Thank you, everybody. Welcome. And bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks again. Bye.
Thanks a lot,
Bye.
everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye, everyone. Have a blessed day.
Take care, everyone.